What do you personally believe what is the correlation between branding and meaning?
Well, I think it's about meaning. We all have beliefs which are formed in early stage as a human being, as a child. If you believe in something, you want to be triggered on those values to consider a certain brand. You need to be true to your own identity as a brand. It's not different from a person. A brand, in my opinion, is a person. If you understand what is in our deeper core, then personalization don't necessarily need over 1,000 of creatives. If you can bring that back to, let's say, 10 deeper values that are more predominant in a certain category, most category entry points that are not defined in a way, what do they really mean? What do they trigger? End up with very mechanical values that doesn't help someone to consider your brand as, this is the brand I belong to. Understanding the values is key to me to empower consumers.
Hello and welcome to the AdTech Heroes podcast. In today's episode, we're going to talk about putting psychology back into the marketing mix. I'm delighted to be joined by Charles van Winsen, who's the founder of MindSync. Hi, Charles. How's it going?
Good. Thank you, Del, for having me here.
Great to have you here today on this episode. So, let's get straight into it. Let's start with your career. Tell me more about it.
My career, I started, I think, very young as an entrepreneur. I had several mistakes, I think, when I was very young. I dropped off from school, classic one. But my wife, she trapped me that was still paying the university when we were starting sharing our home. So I had to finish it from her. And so then when my first business in fashion collapsed, I started working at HP, and I promised myself not working in finance or IT. And then I figured out like, wow, this is really interesting, and I actually never left. And then later, I started in 2012, 2013. I started with my business associate in AdTech. And we started our, our own agency has always been on the production side of the creatives, when we used to call it banners, and now we use digital advertising. So a very interesting journey. So we built later on. The production was so uh, was a lot of productions and personalization on skill. I think we adopted it very quickly. But we were always in the trouble with media agencies and in the middle of creative agencies. So we started building a creative intelligence or creative dynamic platform. And out of that question raised the more deeper question, like how can we really personalize advertising? That was actually how MindSync started.
Wow. And how easy was it to start a venture in the Netherlands? Is it quite easy to set up a company, or is there a lot of regulations around it?
Well, it's pretty easy. Pretty easy, yeah, yeah. So we started at the attic of a house, and then classic one. The first employees came in, but actually, you have to work hard. That's the only thing. But from a regulational perspective and an open market is great. Yeah.
Sounds amazing. So tell me more about MindSync, what you're currently doing.
Yeah, so it's a real-time platform that measures if brands are consistent. That's how it originally started. And we trained without LLMs. It was before the LLM hype. We started like building artificial intelligence, I think the classic way, so building knowledge graphs. We were training the system to recognize certain emotional and psychological patterns in communication. So what it does is not qualitative research. It's also not research classically what you do you know pre-positioning, but it can help by positioning. But it's we take the communication of a brand as the middle point, and in Gartner you could say, oh, this brand is positioned like this or that, and we actually analyzing if you really do that. Do you walk the talk? I think that's the short version of MindSync. And then from a brand perspective, how are your brand values being executed in communication? Because on strategy paper, it's difficult, but if you eventually have it, it's easy. But then the pressure starts when you start mixing up with campaign goals or audience insights, etc. And then the platforms usually where you advertise on are designed for performance, for promotional aspects, and not really to build your brand. So to keep track on, is this app's ad or campaign really contributing to building my brand and to have consumers consider my brand using our brand values? That's actually what it does in real time.
Amazing. I believe technology is at the heart of everything you do. Like, has your background been in technology? And if not, like, what have you kind of used as resources to build that technology within your
Yeah, well,
company?
my background is in marketing. So my studies were about strategic marketing, but I was very intrigued by psychology because I think that that's at the core of what we're doing. So that is really where it came from, understanding human behavior. But if you look to behavior scientists, it's most often about biases or heuristics or putting labels on behavior. And I was more interested in the profound values that are more deeper into our intrinsic, evolution and behavior of humans. So the blueprint behind the brand positioning, that's where I'm really interested in. So that's really the background. So like technology is for me, it's an enabler to scale psychology because it's most often difficult to understand. A lot of people are not educated to understand psychology. So it feels like, oh, I'm talking to a very ultra blue person and the industry is creative led, like yellow personalities. So I was really interested, how can we build that bridge? Because it's at the core of behavior to understand, to have a better mental understanding, which eventually became our mission. To make that widely adopted in the industry, and a platform and technology can help with that, with a user interface. But mathematical principles and psychology becomes psychometrics. That's really where my drive is coming from.
Amazing. And what do you personally believe is the correlation between branding and meaning?
Well, I think it's about meaning. Like we all have beliefs, which are formed in early stage as a human being, as a child. So we believe in certain things, and a large portion of it is already like formed by evolution. We all went through the same process when we came on this earth, like from birth to growing up. And in between, of course, everything is different from culture, the country where you start growing up. Um, but yeah, that is at the core of behavior. So,
Amazing. And how are you empowering your consumers at MindSync?
well, like understanding those values. Sorry, and to come back on your previous questions, like if there's a difference between brand and meaning or what is leading, I think that if you believe in something, you want to be triggered on those values to consider like to consider a certain brand consideration. It's built on values, so that's why I think that the meaning of those values, we're all capable of seeing, oh, this spot is still available in the market, that one maybe not, so this is what we pick. And I don't believe that it works. Of course it works like that, but you need to be true to your own identity as a brand. It's not different from a person. A brand, in my opinion, is a person. And that's why a lot of brands working with archetypes from Carl Jung, for instance, that's really helpful. But it's something different than a persona or targeting. That's more on reasons to believe as well, but also on USPs. And so I think that brands are meaningful values. So I think that if you understand what is in our deeper core, then personalization don't necessarily need over 1,000 of creatives. If you can bring that back to, let's say, 10 deeper values that are more predominant in a certain category, that's really, really interesting. Then you start with category entry points we are talking about. But if you look to the most category entry points that are not defined in a way, what do they really mean? What do they trigger? And so you end up with very mechanical values that doesn't help someone to consider your brand as, this is the brand I belong to. Other than, this product is now in a promotion, let's buy it because it's cheap. Or also has to do meaning also has to do with the tension fields between enforcement and empowerment. And I think that's your second question, right? Like, how do you empower your consumer? Is to understand, how do you talk to your consumers in a way that you trigger the meaning of the values in a way that it's open, so that they have space in between to understand, wow, this is recalling to me, and now I'm considering this brand. And if you do that consistently, I think there are let's say, a lot of recent researches as well that really prove that if you not being emotional alone, but also understand the meaning of the brand and understand if that is a meaning that consumers, uh, uh, consider your brand and have a good recall. I think that that's also a little bit lacking in theories like Byron Sharp. No offense, because it's I really true believe in those theories, but understanding the values is key to me to empower the consumers.
And from your experience, do you feel some brands have more powerful meaning than others? And are there brands that have, from what you've seen, like little to no meaning as well?
Well, yeah, I think that's like in the core is already decided in the category you're operating with. So, with no offense, but if you look into McDonald's, for instance, the predominant category entry point is not what they put in their brand books. It's fat food, which is leading, because in back in evolution we lived 1,000 years as human beings outside in the cold without days with food. So it's so programmed in our automatic system that we crave fat food or sugar because that gave us that rush. We're programmed like that. So I think that if you understand as a brand that those are values you can't ignore, you can take a position like, this is how I want to be and this is how I handle those values. I think that understanding is really helpful in for brands to understand.
And have you seen some do the opposite, like have great meaning? Like, are there any examples that you can think of where a brand you've seen is, you sat back and you thought, wow, this brand definitely has a lot of meaning in what they do?
Well, in the Netherlands, I think Coolblue. I'm not sure if you know them, but it's a consumer electronics retailer. I think they well understand what they're doing. They understand the values. I believe they understand the deeper cravings in this industry as well. For instance, to want to the need to be competitive, to be fast forward, to improve and innovate. So I think that is a typical brand. Let's say here in the Netherlands, I think that on every touch point they have, they truly understand the value, everything for a smile. And I think that is one that doesn't exploit those deeper triggers, but they really take position as a brand. Like, this is our identity and personality. This is how we handle those values. So I think that is in the Netherlands is definitely one. Um, well, like, you know, can come up with tons of great brands like Nike that understand it. On the other way, if you mirror, like for instance, what Nike does is, if you want to be a top athlete, you have to sacrifice everything. I think that's true. I think it's how it works. Who am I to bust that? Um, but if you say I empower every sports athlete in the world, but you promote sacrificing, I think they can do better than that. I think there's a lot below the belt to play with, that you still can be urgent for consumers, but empowering athletes is something different than exploiting sacrifice, I think. So yeah, I think there's a thin layer in understanding, but it can be very profound if you choose the right things in all the touch points. Because if you look to their digital advertisements, it's I think it's horrible.
And you touched briefly on on the empathy part. So how can brands put empathy in advertising? What can they do in that sense? And does it make sense to put empathy in advertising?
Yeah, like empathy is also in this thin layer of enforcing and empowerment. So what they can do, but then then I have to promote myself. Or we build a map of consciousness. And so in this map of consciousness, this our system also measures the way all the terms and determinants we call it. So that the points that we're analyzing is over 15,000 per ad. It's not that we're giving it back to every client, but it's it's a formula that measures in which layer of consciousness are you communicating with your consumer. So and that can be very helpful to be more empathetic in your communication. So you can say I empower people, but the behavior in communication can really drift off to, yeah, of course, to sales and promotional objectives in communication. Um, but what we see over 2 billion ads we analyzed from television commercials to TikToks to whatever to just social posts in written text on LinkedIn is that if you work well with the map of consciousness and you can be urgent, but you have the trust that if you leave the message open, that you have a stronger vehicle and they will come back. This is what we consistently now see is that the CPA of these advertisers, they drop, but like 40% sometimes, like really. And that means that that the quality of your communication is better, or what we say is more conscious. And what we then see that's it's a side effect. You see sometimes that the direct click and the direct engagement is lower, and we say, okay, that's good because it's only distraction. What we see is that the direct traffic, so people searching on Google and going directly to the web shop or the whatever, is increasing. So these are really interesting metrics that are actually 180% different than where we're steering on as brand. So yeah, I think we need some more proof to really bring this into the market, but this is what we see, and I think that that is the true power of empathy, to respect someone's consciousness.
Yeah, and I think if I was to think of the brands or the advertising um, that I've seen, the ones that you remember are the ones that do have an element of emotion and empathy, right? I think they then spark conversation as well. I think that's an important part of brands and their engagement with their consumers, right? Is to start that conversation, start that, um, yeah, storytelling, and emotion and empathy is a big part of that.
Yeah, and I think that the market is the market is, I think, on a good track. So we recognize that we were too short term focused. Like that there are a lot of researches going on right now that prove that if you invest in your longer term, you be more emotional or empathetic. That that also results in better profits, market share, whatever. I won't say don't do it because I think you know this is also about the dollars or the euros uh, you get, like the revenue driven whatever results. And so I think you have to find a good mix on how do I use enforcement? How do I use manipulation a little bit? Like, but the end of the line, it needs to ladder up to who you want to be as a brand. And like, if you are a brand that is forceful, I don't care. It's who you want to be. But now we're so over focused on KPIs, and we know that. So like, I don't have to predict this conversation, and we're talking about more emotions and storytelling. But I think that the below there is it's not that complex, and hopefully with MindSync we can bring that, let's say, complex theories to make it actionable, to understand across the board, and not only high up in organizations, Let's say if Kantar does a study, a great study, and they bring it, then you get a 40 page of, how the research went and a lot of great insights. But it doesn't travel to the social media manager that has a lot of power and media budgets to do their own thing. And they say, like, oh, we have followers, we have engagement, we went viral, yeah, fine. But how much that did that break or build on your brand in total? That I think that is why you need to keep control. And also with the recent announcements from, for instance, Unilever that says, okay, a large amount of our media budgets are switching to influencer and the creator economy, which is great. But how do you make sure that you build your brand? Because, let's say, a famous creator or whatever is already a brand and they do have their own purpose and goals. And you don't want to restrict them too much because they're powerful in the way how they are. So they have to be themselves. But you can ask the question like, is this really contributing to consider my brand? And are my brand goals in there and my campaign goals or whatever I want to say? Is it empathetic or is it just manipulative or whatever? So I think this is really, it's an interesting time where we're in, definitely.
Definitely. And what role does AI play in all of this? Um, yeah, how important is AI, and d- has then we've talked about empathy and emotion, we've talked about purpose and meaning. Like, yeah, where does AI come into all of this when it comes to this human connection?
Yeah, well, it's a good question because what's the definition of AI today? Like how I see it, it's just that this is so much talks about this, but of course you need to be in control. You need to understand what AI is doing. It can't be arbitrary. You need to understand, is this still who I am as a brand? So I think a lot of brands in the first time lost that track. So they need to go back before you really install AI, understanding how can AI serve my brand personality? How can AI make decisions that are in line with who I am as a brand? So that's first of all. Secondly, for us, it's just mathematics. It's just that the it's so over complex, the human brain, that we even don't know how it works exactly, whatever. But we do know that a lot of theories are being proved. So I rely on that. I trust it. I make sure that we have scientists on board that walk with us to see how we implement it. Is that the way how it's meant to be? Also about meaning. Is this theory doing what it should do, where it's meant to be for? And so, and then if you have that right, it's just a formula that can measure things for us. And if you have a pattern, seeing that we can go back in years. So we have like deals with Nielsen and other suppliers. So if we do an analysis for a brand, we create that holistic view instantly. Like in one morning, we can process over 100,000 ads from television to whatever. So you get that holistic view, and that's where AI is helpful because it's you can't do that with people. Yeah, indeed, you save a lot of time so that the data scientist or the researcher can focus on research. So for me, that is where AI helps make sense out of things if you train it well. And then, of course, in the best case, you want to predict or pre-script, like you want to build several scenarios. It's also math, so the machine can calculate that on, like I want to be there, like at a tram station or subway, but what you're now doing, you ending there. It's not what you want. So these are the recommendations to get that right again. So that's really helpful for the creator or the brand marketeer or the campaign manager to take those actionable insights and use it. And then I think you use AI in the right way.
Makes sense. But then does that lead to AI taking away critical thinking, in your opinion?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and also recent studies from MIT, you might have seen them. Yeah, I do believe that. And let's say I'm not sure what your personal experience is with language models, apart from that they're hallucinating like hell. And we also tried it to do it with language models because we thought, this makes it a lot easier. Why do we build something so complex and train it? But just bullshit what's getting out there. You see like people making a target audience analysis with a language model. It's complete bullshit what in there. So and it can't calculate, it can't reason, it can't think. I don't believe that. If we don't understand how the process works in the brain, you know, how can you reproduce something that you make sure that that is the way how we think? So yeah, I I don't think it will replace, because I will it will backfire very soon, I believe, and it takes away critical thinking because look to yourself. If you type an email yourself, you have a true message, is authentic, is who you are. And if I work with a language model and think, let's create an email out of this, and you read it, and then I want to adjust it a little bit, and then adjust it a little bit, and then you're an hour away from when you started. So I'm not sure. I think it will replace certain jobs, but I'm not so afraid for that.
So you still feel there's a need for humans in our industry then?
Yeah, of
We've all
course.
all got our jobs,
Yeah, you don't want to interact with a like this is interesting, and I don't know how far you want to go in this topic, but it's a really interesting topic. Like for years, also in evolution, we never talked to it. There was no language. So we think that language is leading in making connections, but it isn't. Uh, 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 like what is it? A foetus is already communicating. That's how real communication works. It's that the thoughts that you can feel is really philosophical, but I really like those theories a lot. And that is also you can. It's also when a person steps into a room, sometimes the entire energy changes. That is how connection works. And a language model will never take that away, because it is a living being, and we interact with living beings. So i I think for the short term it might take away humans, but eventually we need humans. So if you take that into consideration, I trust that process.
there's that whole nostalgia part of it as well, right? So a lot of us that grew up in the 80s, the 90s, we're going back to some old things, right? Like using maybe phones that aren't smartphones, and because you're literally just using it for a phone call, or I don't know, just sitting down and reading a newspaper is quite therapeutic now, just sit
Yeah,
down, with a coffee,
logical.
and because you're not distracted by many different things while you're on your phone. Um, you know,
Also has to do with
fashion
meaning.
as well. Fashion, right? Fashion's has goes up, changes all the time. And now, you look back at and some old things that you were probably wearing 20 years ago, and they're coming back into fashion. So, do you think that plays a big part as well in terms of human and connection? Is that there's just that basic that we all crave that basic need, right? And if we're not getting that from
It's so
all of
much
the
it's so much more simple than we think, I believe. And I think that's also the theories we use, is also bring it back to the core and bring personalization back to, let's say, 10 deeper drives and choose one or two. That's it. It's so super simple, because like this is also about meaning. Like what's the meaning in life? We can't answer that question. And as long as we can't answer that question, we are in search for meaning. So like we don't want things to be automated eventually. I don't believe that. Of course, in a certain way, but then still, if you have critical, can be of value in terms of critical thinking. That's really important. But look at how many younger people have psychological problems, like with the information overload we have. All the information, like we measure a lot on TikTok as well, and most brands are only 2% differentiating on psychological levels. We all say exactly the same if you bring it back to those cores. And like there's a great book from John Vervaeke called The Meaning Crisis. If you read that book, it's like really recognizable. It's the same religion, and it's the same that like philosophers like Nietzsche told us many years ago. Like if you take away religion in civilizations, not that I am a religious person, by the way, but if you take that away, society will collapse because we need that guidance in life to understand who we are and our place in the world. And so, also to bring it back to advertising and mass communication as a whole, because we do a lot more than only marketing, also governmental communication, news communication. How do you make sure that you make people conscious about their considerations and not misleading them for consideration, considering your brand? I think that is so much more powerful. It's how Mahatma Gandhi, pushed away the UK from India, right? It's just by resonating at the right frequency. So I know really sounds spiritual, but I think there's a profound truth in that part. And yeah, it's not that difficult to understand it. Just try it out as a brand and see how it results. You will be amazed.
It's interesting because obviously brands still want to target, typically not all brands, but majority, the masses, right? The majority,
Yeah,
and try to tap
yeah.
into that. And even when it comes to relating it back to digital advertising, when you, as a media owner or a vendor or a technology, going back to the brand, they will still ask, well, what's the scale? How much can I deliver? How much?
And that's a really interesting question, Dal, because like if you go back to um, let's say the start of propaganda marketing, they used to call it propaganda in the beginning of 1900 somewhere, I don't know exactly, but you have Walter Lippmann and you have Edward Bernays, who was a cousin of Freud, and he studied based on the Freud theoretical stuff, psychoanalytical stuff, and they were looking for how to influence the mass, how to use something individual in mass communication. And again, if you bring it back to evolutionary, or let's say the deeper drivers of humans, it's really easy to, you know, to hyper target people in masses. If you understand that process, I think that is in a good way what we try to do with MindSync. How can you sync all the minds as much as you can? So this is this way of thinking is very scalable. But maybe the last thing about this, I don't know. Let's say I'm really passionate about this type of topics. But you have Ian McCulchrist. He's also a great researcher. He's very respected, like John Viveki. I think they did some things together as well. But his studies goes about how the left hemisphere of the brains is taking over of the right one. There's a book called Master in His Emissary. It's really interesting that the majority of humans are only using their left brains. Let's say, I'm not sure to say this right, but the left brain is taking over. Let's keep it that way to keep it simple. But that if you put that principle on the 2 billion ads and communications we did, it's completely true. And it's really interesting that we spend so much money on brand positioning and strategic thinking and stuff, and then we let our left hemisphere decide how to put it in the real communication. So on paper, and it was really funny in some of the analysis we did, we also by accident we had some briefings in there, and in the briefing document we're scoring like super high. We're like, what is this? Oh wow, it's a briefing document. So brands are able to put it on paper in the right way, but then in execution we use predominantly left brain thinking, and then you lost meaning. So you actually accelerating the lack of meaning at society. So if you train AI based on those principles, you you're creating you're increasing the gap with the lack between meaning and consideration with a multitude. So
So what's the solution, Charles? What can we do to solve all these issues and this disconnect, I'd say?
well, I don't have the true formula yet, but I'm pretty sure that we're on the right track.
Will it be back to maths? Will it be a formula in maths, mathematical equation that will solve this? Again, going back to humans.
I think that math can really and AI can really contribute to yeah, to get to a certain formula. Um, but I think that those more primary drivers, understanding those and bring that back and rush less, but make sure that that is embedded in the way we communicate, will definitely on the right track to keep that to get to the solution. I'm pretty sure about that. So that is why I think that if you can map it on the map of consciousness, and you can see if you really align to true values, actually you can also choose the wrong values. So that is not the solution. Is not that we can only measure it, and we can connect it to your performance. So I'm pretty sure that one of the solutions is there. Yeah, it's in the old ancient theories is the answer, I believe. Yes.
Amazing. We always finish off our podcast episodes with this question, so we'd love to get your take on it. If you had a superpower in ad tech, what would it be?
A map of consciousness. I already
Easy as
gave the
that.
answer. Yeah, I believe in that. It's just true superpower. Yeah. If you can reduce CPA like this consistently, I believe this is the right path to that superpower.
So is that something that you could physically see it? Uh, Like you press a button in your glasses and you'll be able to see.
Oh, like that. Wow. Whew. If you could measure the energy frequencies, I do believe you can see it. Yeah. In another dimension, maybe.
Let's see. Let's see if that happens and that becomes a reality.
Exactly. Great.
Great. Okay, I think that's all we've got time for in today's episode. Thank you, Charles, for your time. It's been great chatting to you.
Thank you, Adele, for this invitation. I really loved it. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.